Welcome to Mortgages and More, your go-to podcast for the latest insights in the mortgage industry. Join us as we dive into expert advice, unveil actionable tips, and learn how to empower the next generation of home buyers. Get ready to elevate your knowledge and make those property dreams a reality. Let's get started.
We are back. Back. Kyle, always good to see you, buddy.
Yes, sir. Good to be seen.
Let's get rocking.
We have a absolute gem with us today. It blows my mind how Richard Milligan has ever gone under the radar with anyone. He's 6'6", so he's just a large human being, or a tall. I'm large. You're tall. And so I don't know how people miss him, but when I hear the word recruiting mentioned in our industry, there is no one that should ever be said next other than the name Richard Milligan. To me, he is the voice on recruiting in our space. The way he does it is unbelievable. And so I am honored that he said yes to being a part of this book. Richard, welcome to the podcast, and thanks for being a part of this, brother.
I'm just hyped to be here, man. Everybody needs a hype man. Kyle Draper is my hype man. Okay.
Oh, yeah.
I will do that all day, every day for free.
I'm honored to be here.
So can you give us a quick nugget, a quick flyby, a preview, if you will, of what you will be writing about in the book?
Yeah. So my experience comes as a recruiting consultant, a recruiting coach. So last 7 years, 7 years ago, I started a company called 4C Recruiting. And over the last 7 years, I've spent over 12,000 hours in a coach's seat with leaders who are trying to build teams that are recruiting. And so anything I have to share is going to come from that experience and is going to come from being what I would call an information aggregator. Lots of conversations, lots of different people, lots of different platforms that they're on. And one of the things that I have noticed that was a big aha for me that I'm going to share in the book is this idea that I've kind of coined as what I call a value gap. And the idea is that today, because of social and because of the internet, what digital is, that historically, when you look at people who have been successful, they have been people that have brought enormous amounts of value to people that have had high value systems, right? But for that individual to be successful, that individual had to be in a one-to-one conversation, right? And so you look at older style leaders or older style salespeople, they almost always say, I'm most successful when I'm face-to-face or when I'm breaking bread, right? And that's true because they have a lot of value to give face-to-face and they have a high-value system. And when you meet high-value people, you just know it, right? 5-minute conversation, you know whether that person has a moral compass and gives value. Insert 2009, Facebook takes over MySpace as the #1 social platform. We're now 14 years later into the culmination of maturity around social, maturity around digital. There is no degree of separation. And that has changed the game as it relates to being a salesperson, as it relates to being a leader, and that I don't have to meet you face to face anymore to know whether you bring value. And so historically, if you go back and you just take a historical figure like a Winston Churchill, and you're like, how was a Winston Churchill one of the most influential people in world history? Winston Churchill was one of the first people to ever hack what I would call the value gap. Winston Churchill in the early 1920s actually fell out of power in his home country, fell out of political power. And for the window of time that most people don't know anything about him, Winston Churchill was basically building a personal brand. He was traveling the world by train. He traveled 28 of the 32 states in the US, and he did public speaking. What most people don't know about that window of time is that he had those speeches transcribed. He turned them into articles, and he would post those articles in publications across the entire world. He then went on every radio program that he could possibly be on, whether it was in his home country or in another country. And over this window of time, Winston Churchill became the Winston Churchill that we knew before he was ever actually in power. Some of the greatest books he wrote were in a window of time where he was not of influence. Now insert Nazism and Hitler, and Winston Churchill was known as a person of value, high value system with lots of value to bring, right moment, right place, right time. And so you can take an example of that and insert it into what today we now know as social media and digital. And what people have to understand is that if you want to be successful today, you have to create a gap of value from what people can see from your competitor to who you are in that space. A high value system, a high core value system. Core values are your actions, they're your behaviors. The second part of that is, can you actually bring me value? And if you can bring me value, then you're creating a gap. And when you show up one-to-one in that conversation, you can immediately have success. And so that value gap is something I'm going to talk about in the book. And so what it really means to people is this: if you want to grow your business, if you want to scale your business today, you have to create that thing. And where you start is knowing your value system, because you can create content around your core value system, your actions, your behaviors, right? You have to actually create content around the value that you can actually bring to someone. And the people that are avoiding that space because they're not comfortable with video, they're not comfortable with the written word, and they're not willing to post on a daily basis, those people are going to be dominated moving forward by the people who close that gap.
Brian, did I tell you that
I'm floored. Wow.
It's so I've never heard Winston Churchill's story told that way. It's unbelievable.
Yeah, I mean, he essentially he was the one of the first influencers that we know today. But imagine what he could do today at scale with technology, right?
So let me ask one final question, and we'll keep it short to hit our time frame for these. In everything that you just said, for the LO that's like, oh man, he's right, I'm the worst at this, I've got to be better, otherwise I'm going to become irrelevant. Like, what to you is a good first step in somebody getting better at what they're currently really bad at?
As in the digital space?
Yeah, like just in beginning to create that value gap for themselves.
Well, one of the cool things about what you're doing with the book is that there'll be a QR code in there that we're going to put in there that will take them to a formal presentation on how to actually identify where you would bring value. And the cool thing about this, Ryan and Kyle, is that we're all unique. The great thing about social is that when we show up as the authentic, real version of ourselves, no one can duplicate that.
Mm-hmm.
And too many people are trying to become somebody else instead of becoming fully who they are. Digital is successful because it allows us to humanize ourselves. So the moment you try to become something else or somebody else, you're not that human, you're somebody else, right? My teenagers call it being a try-hard. You're trying really hard, right? And people know when you're a try-hard.
Oh yeah.
Right. And so one of the things that we'll have is a step-by-step process that they can go through to identify their top values.
Wow.
Right. Whenever I say, like, one of my top values is family first or family matters, that is not hard for me to actually create content around, because the framework is this: it's not content creation, it's content curation. And that is different. If I constantly show up and go, today I got to create content, I am having to think like a marketer or some sort of social media manager or social media guru. When I show up and say, I simply need to humanize myself, I'm going to curate my value system, I'm leaving here and I'm going to the movies on a Thursday afternoon with my kids because they're out of school this week. I will curate that content. Why? Because family matters, family first is one of my values.
So good.
We
Awesome.
oversimplify this. I think we complicate it, and it doesn't need to be that complicated.
We have 10 seconds left. What movie are you going to see?
Kids get to choose. There's 3 choices. They're all PG-13. So I only remove the rated R movie, Scott.
Well, I can't wait. In a future episode, we're going to discuss the breakdown of the movie that the Milligans went and saw.
Right
Let's
on.
do it. Let's do it.
Appreciate you, bro. Love you, man.
Thanks.
Thanks for being on with us.
Thank you, Richard.
Yeah, thanks for having me, fellas.
See you guys.